Welcome back to Insight. Thanks for sharing your weekend morning with us. And if you're over 35, you've tuned in on a great day because we're talking about something that you can always understand, and that's the music of the 60s. Not just the chart music, the stuff that you heard played all over the country, but the music, the homegrown music right here in South Florida. Florida garage bands. And with us again is Jeff Lemlich, who is the author of Savage Lost, a book which details the history of local homegrown garage band music in South Florida. Now, you have a real reason for starting this. I understand you've got a record collection that some people would kill for, thousands and thousands of records.
You know what's funny, Dave? Nobody really plans on becoming a record collector. I guess any kind of a collector, too. But when I was a little kid, like 9 years old, I would listen to WFUN and WQAM, and something just really connected there. I can't really put it into words. It's really intangible, but it was a combination of the music, the DJs, the jingles, the promotions. It really was geared toward me, or so it felt. And I learned that come my 10th birthday, I can take the $5 of birthday money that I got and spend it on 45s. And my sister and I went down the Grandway, and it was unbelievable. I mean, between my sister and I, we bought Paperback Writer by the Beatles. We bought Girl, I Got News for You by the Birdwatchers, who were a local band. We bought Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones.
No,
we bought so many
charts
records
with you?
Yeah. Well, when I discovered the WQAM Top 56 survey, Tiger Radio, that's what really did it for me, because I would just sit there and check off all the songs that I heard, and it was my goal to hear all 56 songs on the chart. And then it became my goal to own as many of them as I could. And it's 66 cents each. I mean, it's not like when you go out to the store and buy a single today, $3.50 for one song. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So how many have you collected?
That's really hard to say. I stopped counting after 3,000, and that was in 1974. So it's really gone up substantially from there. These days, I don't go for quantity, I go for quality. There was a time when I discovered Goodwill stores, and it was unbelievable. The downtown Miami Goodwill store, records were 15 for $1, and my sister and I would go there and spend all day. 15 for $1. We would buy 75 singles for $5. So I could pick up any song that I remembered from my early childhood, even though I was only 15 at the time, but my real early childhood. And we would buy things we didn't even like, but at 15 for $1. I mean, this song was on the chart. It got to the point where I had all the hits after a while and didn't need to buy any more hit records, and went and started buying some of the misses of these acts. If there was a group that I liked, I would go buy some of their stiffs as well. And I discovered that those were as good as the hits. And one of the other things that I discovered was that a lot of the groups that I grew up listening to on the radio were from not only my hometown, but were living right down the street from me. Turns out the Montels, they lived right down the street from me. They went to the high school I would years later go to.
And you didn't realize that when you were
I didn't realize that at the time. John Doyle's band, we're going to meet John, but there were some members of his band that went to Southwest High, and I lived literally a block down the street from Southwest High. Their song was top 10 on WFUN and WQAM. And I would listen to it all the time. It was one of my favorite songs. And the thing really to realize back then is that we didn't even think that it's a local group that we were listening to. You would hear the latest song by the Rolling Stones, then you would hear the latest song by just about anybody who was out and hot and popular. And then you would hear Evil come on. And following Evil, you'd hear Friday on My Mind by the Easy Beats. You'd hear a little bit of Soul by the Music Explosion. And the other songs that were really big in May of '67 when that was climbing the charts. Same thing with the Montels in 1966, where you'd hear Paint It Black and Gloria and Girl, I Got News for You and all these songs. No one would really sit and say, well, this is a local band. There was no inferiority complex as far as that went with the radio stations, because the radio stations encouraged the growth of local bands and encouraged the playing of all these local songs.
That was unusual here where I grew up in upstate New York. You never heard the local bands on local radio. It was always playlist radio. Very seldom did a local band ever break through and get on the air. What made it different here? Talent or
I don't really
availability?
think it was different here. Maybe you were in a market where they just weren't as receptive.
Small town.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the Pacific Northwest, there was a lot of support for the groups, and some of those groups broke nationally, like the Kingsmen and Paul Revere and the Raiders. They started out as regional acts from that section of the area. Minnesota, it was the same way. Liar, Liar by the Castaways became a national hit, but that was a small Minnesota band that just happened to break nationally. There was a lot of support for local bands in the mid-'60s, and part of that, too, is because it helped the station's image. A band-to-station image was very important in those days, And the stations down here each had their own bandstands. WQAM had the Miami bandstand, WFUN had the Florida bandstand.
These were dance shows.
Right,
yeah.
Show dances. And the jocks from the stations got actively involved in these show dances. And it was really a creative time to be in a group and a creative time to be in radio, and everybody helped each other. There was lots of cooperation, and that really helped the scene grow. And there was a time when we had hundreds of working bands down here, like we do now, but there was a lot more cooperation from radio at the time.
Well, why did they dry up in the 70s?
There were a lot of reasons why it dried up, and it really started in the late 60s. Part of it was that a lot of concert action was happening down here. A lot of it was that the ballrooms that were opening, places like The Image and Sunny Isles, which was a great place, but they were bringing down lots of national groups to the point where if you can see the Mothers of Invention, if you can see Country Joe and the Fish, the Yardbirds in their days when they were about to become Led Zeppelin, they were all playing down here with local bands opening. The local bands just weren't as important to the kids at that point as the national groups were, whereas back in 65, 66, 67, you would go see the local groups perform because outside of a couple of television programs and a couple of package tours that would come down, there really wasn't the opportunity to see all these groups. So the groups like the Shags and like the Canadian Legends and like Evil and like the Montells became big stars here in South Florida and all throughout Florida where their songs were played, and a lot of them were picked up by national labels too.
But as we're going to find out in a minute, being picked up by a national label didn't necessarily mean that you're going to have stardom.
Absolutely.
So we'll get into that in just a second. When Insight continues, we'll talk to a member of one of these bands and find out what it was like to be in a garage band that got a contract, and then sort of went into oblivion. We'll be back.